Hi, welcome. I'm so glad that you're doing data science with me and that you've been able to complete the first two lessons, followed the instructions to install Anaconda and do some math operations in Python. Okay, so here in this lesson, we're going to talk about data types that comes with Python, or that is going to help you handle different data types in Python. Okay. So if you've been following our lesson, you should be able to open Anaconda, launch Jupyter Notebook, and create a new notebook file that can take you here. Okay, that can take you to a blank notebook file so that you follow all these things, right? Now, if you remember in our last discussion, we talked about comments. You realize that all the lessons we're gonna do today, I've commented them out. Okay, so we have various data types in Python. In this lesson, I'm going to introduce the first three to you. In the next lesson, I'll introduce the next four that I think we should know. Okay. So the first one I'll talk about is numbers. So in Python, there is part called there's a data that called numbers. What I mean by data is we can represent numbers, or we can Python know how to handle numbers. Okay, that's what I mean. So the numbers comes in forms of integers and floats. Okay, what an integer means is that it's used for counting. That is the normal numbers that you know, 0, 1, 2, 3, and the rest. It can be a negative number. So long as it's integer, we are okay with that. Okay, and more operations where decimals aren't needed. So when you don't need decimals, you talk about integers. An example that I can say is that, if you remember, we've done variable assignment. So if I say x equals 5, 5 is an integer. So if I print this x, right, and run this code, I'm supposed to get 5 here, right? You get a 5 right under it. I can go ahead and represent another variable like y equals, let's say, -7. This is an integer, right? Um, if you run this, or if you say print um, x plus y, if I do that, I'm going to get the sum of these two. So I have -2, right? So 5 plus -7 will give you -2. Um, if you remember in our second lesson, I mentioned that for numbers, we don't put any code inside the print bracket. Okay, so yeah, that is the way Python handle integers. If you have an integer and you want to print it, there is no quotation. You just use the integer straight away. What I mean is, you can just print straight away. I have 5 plus -7. When I run this, I'm okay. I have the same -2, right? So I can use variable assignment to assign 5 to x and -7 to y, and I have the same thing. Float, on the other hand, is used when working with measurements, probabilities, or any calculation that require decimals. Okay, so if you are doing something that require decimals, so an example of a floating variable is, let's say, this z that is equal to 3.14, and then 3.14. If I print this z, I'm gonna have sorry, I'm gonna have z to be 3.14. Okay, so um, um, if I print this, right, so if you want to know the type of the variable you are dealing with, the variable type, if you look at this very carefully, I did print z, right, the type of z. This type here is something we'll talk about later, but just know that you can use it to know the type of the data you are dealing with. Okay, so the type of z here is float, right? It prints its class float, right? It belongs to the float data set. You can do the same thing for both the x and the y. So if I print the type of x, it should give me an integer, int. Okay, so these are what I'm talking about. You have integers and floating or float values for in numbers, okay, in Python. So now another data type that we can talk about is string. And for string is all about what you know as alphabets. Okay, you can think of it that way. But one thing that makes string stand in particular is that we often write strings in quotations. Okay, so you can even convert an integer to string. The only thing you have to do is just put the number or the integer in quotation marks, and I'll do that right after that. Okay, I'll just do that here. So string is used to represent test data. That is, if you want to write something, which is essential in data labeling and categorizing, right? So if you want to categorize your data into some particular group, maybe this is a group of boys, maybe this class is for data science, right? So if I want to write something like that, if I say s equals data science, which is we are doing, I have to put it in quotation marks, okay? And that is how you represent strings in Python, okay? So when I do this, I cannot just write x equals data science without a quotation mark. I'm going to get an error, okay? So unless I'm doing variable assignment. So I assigned the string data science to s, right? We've done variable assignment. If I print this s here, I'm going to get data science printed out. Sorry, what do I have here? Yeah, so another thing I think I didn't mention, this is very good that it happened in this video. You realize that the s in this print is capital S, right? And then this one is small s, right? So Python variable assignment is very, very important. It's case sensitive. If you use a small letter, you have to use a small letter. If you use a cap, you have to use a cap letter. Okay. So you realize when I change the small letter, I have the data science print that give me. If I change it to a capital letter, I'm going to have an error because it doesn't know the capital S, right? So here it's very, very important that it happen here. Now accessing specific characters in string. So if I want to access a specific character in string, maybe say I want to access um, the first character, okay. The first character here is D, right? So if I want to access the first one, I have to use this approach print, and I'm going to use s the position 0. Another thing I need to talk about is, as we are doing, we talk about them, okay? Python, the way Python count its list, okay? So this whole thing I'm doing will come under list, okay? But just before we go to the list, it start counting the data signs as 0, 1, 2, 3. So it start counting or indexing from 0. Most people will mention that. So for I want to access the first character, it has the index 0. So again, let's see, there's an error somewhere here. Where is it coming from? Unexpected indent. So there's an indent somewhere that I need to figure out. I don't know where it's coming from. Yeah, so this print here, right? That's a problem. The first part of the first space is not needed, right? So it's very, very key. So you have to understand all these things. And I've decided not to edit any part of this video so that when I make errors, you see where the error is coming from, and that when you make the same error, you do the same thing. Okay. Now, if I want to access the last character, you can count them and try to do the last character uses this approach instead of just counting it to the last. You can also use something called a -1. So this this is s into -1, right? And that will just give me the last character. Now let's look at this. If I gave a space in between this, okay, space is part of the string now. Now if I run this, you realize the first character is now space, right? I have a space before the D, so this is very important. All right, so when you are running, if you want to see the D, you have to make sure that the character D here, you have to make sure that there's no space between the D and then the quotation marks. Okay. Now slicing strings to get substrings. So what this means is that you want to slice some first 5 characters. Okay. The way Python also counts is that if I want to slice the first 5 characters, it's going to start counting 0, 1, 2, 3, and then 4. I mean, space is part of the string. Okay, so the space between the data and the signs is part of the string. Okay. Now, when Python is slicing something or counting from some number to another number, it doesn't include the first one. So the last one, and the first index, it start counting from zero, right? So I'm gonna slice from the first, right? So I'm counting throughout the whole thing. This is the approach you use, and then it's to 5. It means the first 5 characters, but remember the fifth position wouldn't be part because I'm gonna have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And if you count these, how many elements? There are 5 actually, but it just starts counting from 0. Okay. I'm gonna have data, and then the space. The space is important. Now, if there was no space in here, and then the data signs was together, then you're gonna include the fifth one, which is the S. Okay, so I have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and if you count these elements, there are how many? If you use the normal counting approach, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, it's just that Python is that way, that it comes with indexing from 0. Okay. Now, a list which will help us to understand all these slicing techniques. The list here is, it contains or stores some sequence of items, right? So um, the way we do this, let me call something data points here. If you went through the second video, like I said, learn more about variable assignments in the resource we are using, you will know that this is one of the ways we assign variables to some data, okay, or data points given. Okay, so data points, I'm going to say it's equal to, and that's how you create a list in Python. You use square brackets, and I have 1, 2, 3, sorry, and I'm gonna have 4 and 5. Okay, um that way, if I do something like this, is there, there's no need. I mean, this is not an error coming from Python. This is like grammarly, I mean, it's English that they are trying to say here. So this data point, if I want to print it, I'm going to have a list containing data points. Right, so if I print this, I will see, sorry, I have, this is the solution, right? I have data point here, and this is the data, the output of it, a list of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So if I want to add an item to the end of this list, so after it being ended, I'm gonna add one to like some item like 6 or 7 or something. What we use the append function here. So data point dot append, what it means is you just adding whatever you include here. So if I add 6, if I say append 6, it's going to add 6 to the data set. Okay, now if I print the data set, I should have data underscore points. If I print this, I should have 6 added to, if you look at my solution, I have 6 added to it. Okay, now if I can add a lot of stuffs. Okay, sorry, what was it that I added? We could add 6. If you want to add other stuff, you have to add it as a list. Okay, yeah, and then assessing a slice of a list. So like I said, in this list, if I want to count the elements, I have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And so if I want to assess or slice the first 3 items, all that I do is do the same thing for the other one. Data underscore, the same thing like we did in the strings. And I'm going to slice it through the whole row, and then the first 3 elements, or the first 3 members. Okay, and when I run this, I should have the first 3, that is 0, 1, 2. So 0, 1, 2, that is the first 3. The first 3 elements are 1, 2, and 3, right? But their indexing is from 0, 1, 2, and like I said, this third value you have here will not be included. Okay, so it doesn't include a third member. All right, so that is it, and you have this as your exercise. Which of the following are operators and which are values? So you have to go through this. Take your time and answer these. So the following is a variable in which is a string. We have span like that, and we have span in quotations. We have what should the following two expressions evaluate to. Okay, so you need to be able to run all these things, especially this side, right? The third one you can run it and see what happens, or maybe you can, if you think these are just operators or variables or values or whatever, you can take the type, right, to see the type method that we use here to see their types and answer those questions by yourself. Okay, take your time, go through our resource that we are using. Again, I'm gonna link it or put the link of that to this video in the description section, and you can practice as much as you want. Okay, now next lesson we'll take other data type and go through them. See you.